Hi, I'm Chas, and you're watching Chas's Crazy Creations. Come join us as we take a trip to New York City. Both of our kids graduated, our son from high school and our daughter from Colorado State University, so we decided to take them on a celebratory trip to New York City. We opted to rent an Airbnb, which was in this little small doorway and on the 4th floor. We wanted to experience life in an apartment while we were in New York City. It was everything we had hoped for and more. And when we arrived, we got in pretty late, so we stopped at the Churchill for dinner and had some fish and chips and some delightful food from this English little pub. Our Airbnb was a 3-bedroom place and had all the amenities we could hope for. It was a very comfortable place to stay. On our first day there, we hopped on the subway to take us up to Columbia University. We had to hop several trains to get there. While we were waiting and walking the different platforms, there were several musicians that we were able to listen to. I had no idea there were so many levels to the subway system. I'd been on them before, my children have not, but it was a very cool experience. We started up by Columbia University to see this building, the library, where a scene from the Spider-Man movies had happened. We then worked our way back into Central Park, where of course we had to stop by this cool playground. There were playgrounds all over Central Park, and my daughter went down a slide. We walked from one end of Central Park all the way through to the other end, and we stopped at sites like Belvedere Castle and this famous bridge, Bow Bridge, which has been seen in several movies. We stopped over by the John Lennon Memorial Imagine and Strawberry Fields. You could ride carriages or rickshaws throughout this park. We stopped by the famous Bethesda Fountain, and while we were at the fountain, there were more musicians throughout the entire park. It was such a joy and pleasure to listen to. We also made a stop by the mall, where there are lots of vendors and musicians as well. We stopped over by the Hans Christian Andersen sculpture and the Alice in Wonderland sculpture. We also made sure to stop by the Balto sculpture as well. We stopped by the zoo, where the famous cartoon Madagascar was filmed after. While we were there, we were fortunate enough to hear the clock tower go. As we exited Central Park, we moved down 5th Avenue. There are so many stores down this street, and one of the famous ones, Tiffany's, from Breakfast at Tiffany's. We continued down the street, and then we went off to Patsy's Italian restaurant for a delicious dinner. After dinner was over, we stopped by another famous Spider-Man movie set. We continued on and passed the Ed Sullivan Theater, and then we moved on to Radio City Music Hall and NBC Studios. Next up, the Nintendo store. Both my kids, but especially my son, wanted to stop by this store. And my son's favorite game is The Legend of Zelda. So they both left the store with some swag, of course. As we left the store, we stopped by the famous Rockefeller Center, which I was thrilled to see that they've now put roller skating up during the summer, where the ice skating usually is during the winter. On our way back, we stopped through Times Square, where we were able to see the famous ball that drops every New Year's Eve. There's so much going on in this one little section. Lots of stimulation between all the people and the bright signs that encompass this whole area. And last stop for this day, we stopped by Macy's, where the Thanksgiving Day parade that we watch every year happens. They have an amazing wooden escalator and the famous piano from the movie Big. The next day, we went to the 9/11 Memorial Museum, and after that, we visited the Twin Tower Memorial Fountains. The fountains represent an infinity water fountain design, and they span about an acre each. At night, the fountains light up, and the names of all of the people who are lost light up as well, which is absolutely stunning. In addition to that, we were able to see the One World Observatory building. Across the street is this unique building called Oculus, and this is what it looks like inside, and it's basically a giant shopping mall, but the architecture is just absolutely amazing to see. We passed one of the oldest churches and the oldest cemeteries in the city. We stopped at Pasillo's Italian Panini restaurant for some sandwiches. After that, we traveled our way over to Wall Street. On the way down to Battery Park, we stopped by the famous Bull. After visiting Battery Park, we hopped on the free Staten Island Ferry. This ferry goes back and forth between Manhattan and Staten Island, and it's absolutely free. From here, you can see the Statue of Liberty, and you can see the skyline of Manhattan and the Brooklyn Bridge and the Manhattan Bridge. It goes both directions, so you simply ride it over, turn around, hop back on, and come back. Working our way back, we went to some movie sites, like the famous Ghostbusters Firehouse. And we stopped by the Friends TV show apartment. We stopped by Washington Square Park. Several movies were filmed here, and there was lots of culture all around. Musicians, things for sale. It's right next to the New York City University. Lastly, we stopped by Joe's Pizza. This is a famous scene from the movie Spider-Man, which my kids are super huge fans of. We purchased a box of pizza, and we took it home and had delicious New York thin crust pizza. The next day, we were back on the subway, and this time, we were headed over to Brooklyn, and our first stop was at the Adam Yauch Playground. This is a playground that was named after one of the Beastie Boys who had passed away. The Beastie Boys are one of my and my brother's favorite groups. My brother passed away unexpectedly earlier this year, so this stop here was for him and myself. We walked along the pier, and it had amazing and spectacular views of Manhattan all along the way. We stopped for some lunch near the base of the Brooklyn Bridge. We stopped by Pebble Beach, where this was a scene from the Spider-Man movies, and my son grabbed a rock and threw it into the water in honor of the movie. We stopped by Dumbo, the famous movie set for multiple movies. Dumbo stands for Down Under Manhattan Bridge Overpass. And we walked out to the power plant, where another famous Spider-Man movie scene was set. And one of our favorite things to do is to walk from Brooklyn over the Brooklyn Bridge into Manhattan. The bridge is outstanding. The crowds are a little busy, but the views are also amazing. As we finished walking the bridge, we continued on for some famous movie set scenes, and we walked through Little Italy and did a little tourist shopping. On our way back, we stopped by the Beastie Boys Corner. This is where Paul's Boutique album was shot. In addition to that, we stopped by Spider-Man's Peter Parker's apartment set site. Our next day started with a subway ride over to Grand Central Station. Again, this is the site of many movie scenes, and the architecture is just amazing. Here's a quick look at outside Grand Central Station. My daughter was super excited as there was a scene from Avengers shot right here. We continued our walk and we walked right past the Chrysler Building. We stopped by the historic News Building, which is a historic landmark. Inside of this building is a giant globe, and it is behind the inspiration for the Daily Planet for the movie Superman. This day was filled with many movie set sites from the Spider-Man movies, Avenger movies, and more. We stopped by the New York City Library, which was closed for Memorial Weekend. On another day, we stopped in, and we were disappointed that there were no books left here anymore. On the way back, we headed to FAO Schwartz, where the famous movie Big had taken place, one of my favorite movies, where the giant piano was there for you to play on. In addition to that was the Zoltar machine, which I had my fortune read there. This toy shop was led by several employees who were playing with toys and demonstrating them. Most of the cabs had been updated to the latest cars. This one was sitting outside for a quick shot. We stopped into NBC Studios, where I got to take a look at some of the Saturday Night Live paraphernalia. Some of my favorite characters include Chris Farley's motivational speaker, as well as Molly Shannon's Mary Catherine Gallagher. We slowly worked our way back to our apartment that we had rented, where we went back through Times Square as well as right next to Macy's, where the Thanksgiving Day Parade is held every year. We passed the Flatiron Building, which was very close to where we were staying. Our next day, we stopped by a park on the way to the Flatiron Building where Spider-Man rescued some children in the movie. Once we passed through this park, we went to the Flatiron Building where the Daily Bugle was taking place in the Spider-Man movie. We stopped by the Harry Potter store next. There are 2 levels to this store and several rooms. There's things to be bought all over the store, things from wands to costumes to personalized items and more. As you continue to walk through the store, you'll see several set pieces, which were really cool to see in person. A lot of work went into the architecture inside of the building and the creativity. There was a whole section dedicated to sweet treats you could purchase and a little shop that served butterbeers and butterbeer ice cream, which were absolutely delicious. So if you're a Harry Potter fan, you'll definitely want to stop in to see the Golden Snitch, Harry Potter's wand, as well as Hermione and Ron Weasley's, the Elder Wand, other set pieces, and just appreciate all the time and energy that was put into the set pieces as well as the store. I was super impressed by the broom, which was actually made out of twigs and wood, how long that must have taken to make. After we finished up at the store, we had our butterbeers and our butterbeer ice cream, and then we headed over to check out Madison Square Garden. The next stop, in honor of my brother, was Midtown Comics, which is a famous comic book store down by Times Square. They have a second location, but the one we went to was near Times Square. After some dinner, we had tickets to go to the top of the Empire State Building. There was plenty of time to be spent on the way up. They took you through several movie scenes and how the building was built and the timeline of the building, so there was definitely a lot to see on the way up to the top. We opted for the sunset tickets. This allowed us to go upstairs to the observation deck and get a view from the main observation deck, and then we took another elevator all the way up to the top, which was enclosed with glass windows, and we watched the sunset there. We chose this option since it was May. We wanted to make sure no matter what the weather was, we were going to be able to see our view. This was totally worth it. We were nice and warm, not too windy, and we watched the sunset from the glass windows. After the sun had set, we stayed up until it got dark enough to then watch the lights appear in the evening. We moved back down to the main observation deck to take one more walk around before heading down. On our last day there, we head over to the Roosevelt Tram. Once again, this was a site of a Spider-Man movie scene, and we took the tram up and over the river to Roosevelt Island. You can ride the tram both directions. We chose to ride it over to the one side, over on Roosevelt Island, and we took the subway back later that day. We walked along the pier of the island, stopped and saw the bridge, as well as saw a cute little lighthouse on one end of the island. My son, of course, had to stop and do a few flips along the way. And our last evening there, we went to a show on Broadway. Have you ever been to New York City? And what are some of your favorite sites? I'd love to know. Drop me a note in the comment section below. And I hope this inspires you to take a trip of your own. I'd love it if you'd subscribe to my YouTube channel and my blog at chascrazycreations.com. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in my next video. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.